January 2026, Brooklyn Federal Courthouse. Picture the scene. Nicolas Maduro, former president of Venezuela, stands in an orange jumpsuit before an American judge. The charges? Narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering. The prosecutors are reading a list so long it sounds like a CBS receipt. The media will tell you this is a story about justice, about Delta Force raids and international law, about finally catching a dictator. They're wrong. This isn't a story about handcuffs and courtrooms. This is a story about mathematics. Cold, brutal, unforgiving mathematics that doesn't care about your ideology, your speeches, or your red socialist ties. You see those handcuffs clicking around Maduro's wrists today? They were forged a decade ago, not in some CIA black site, not in a DEA weapons lab. They were forged in spreadsheets, in inflation rates, in production collapse. In the moment someone looked at Venezuela's balance sheet and said, quote, zero, here's what nobody's talking about. Venezuela didn't fall because America wanted it to fall. It didn't collapse because of sanctions or sabotage or imperialism. Venezuela fell because economic gravity is real, and you can't print your way out of it. You can't speech your way out of it. You can't propaganda your way out of it. Try to defy economic gravity long enough, and eventually you don't just fall, you crater. So today we're doing something different. We're not analyzing politics. We're not debating socialism versus capitalism. We're performing a forensic autopsy on the most complete economic self-destruction in modern history. We're dissecting how a country sitting on 303 billion barrels of oil, more than Saudi Arabia, managed to make a cup of coffee cost $1 million. How a nation with paradise beaches, fertile land, and an educated population convinced 7.7 million people that walking through a cartel-controlled death jungle was a better option than staying home. How a government turned food into a weapon, electricity into a luxury, and the national currency into literal toilet paper. This is the story of what happens when you try to outsmart basic economics. Spoiler alert, economics always wins. This is the economy that nailed Maduro. This is the final verdict. And it starts with the biggest trap of all: winning the lottery and still going broke. Picture this: 303 billion barrels of oil sitting under your feet. That's the largest proven oil reserve on planet Earth. Bigger than Saudi Arabia's 298 billion. Bigger than anyone. Venezuela didn't just hit the geological lottery, they hit the mega jackpot. At peak production in the late 1990s, they pumped 3.5 million barrels per day. When oil prices were dancing between $100 to $120 per barrel from 2011 to 2014, Venezuela should have been printing money. We're talking $300 to $50 million per day. That's $127 billion per year flowing into a country of just 28 million people. Do the math. That's over $4,500 per person per year just from oil. For a developing country, that's generational wealth. So what went wrong? Here's where the trap snapped shut. In 2002 to 2003, Hugo Chavez had a brilliant idea. The workers at PDVSA, the state oil company, went on strike. These weren't random people. These were petroleum engineers, geologists, the people who actually knew how to extract oil from 10,000 feet underground without blowing everything up. Chavez fired 18,000 of them in one move. And who did he replace them with? Political loyalists, people who knew how to chant slogans but couldn't tell a drill bit from a carburetor, people who got the job because they wore a red shirt and showed up to rallies, not because they understood subsurface pressure dynamics. Let me put this in terms you'll understand. Imagine you own a bakery that prints money, but you fire all the bakers and replace them with people who've never seen an oven. Then you're shocked when the bread stops coming. That's Venezuela. Production started collapsing immediately. By 2015, down to 2.4 million barrels per day. By 2020, 500,000 barrels per day. That's an 86% collapse from peak production. But it gets darker. Maduro didn't just inherit broken infrastructure. He actively made it worse. Instead of reinvesting oil profits into maintaining the rigs, the refineries, the pipelines, he raided PDVSA like a personal ATM machine. Need money for a rally? Take it from the oil company. Need to pay off a general? Take it from the oil company. Maintenance budget? Deleted. Between 2003 and 2013, Venezuela spent $117 billion on social programs, buying political loyalty with free housing, subsidized food, government jobs. Meanwhile, PDVSA's debt exploded from $3 billion to $40 billion. And then, August 2012, the Amway refinery disaster. A gas leak caused an explosion that killed 48 people and shut down Venezuela's largest refinery. 645,000 barrels per day of processing capacity. Gone. This wasn't an act of God. This was a negligence. The facility had been operating without proper maintenance for years because they'd fired everyone who knew how to maintain it. Repairs that should have taken months stretched into years. Why? No capital, no expertise, no one left who knew what they were doing. Here's the sickest part. Even as production collapsed, Venezuela remained 95% dependent on oil for export earnings. 50% of government revenue came from oil by 2013. They built nothing else. No tech sector, no manufacturing base, no agricultural exports, just oil. And when that oil production fell off a cliff, the entire economy went with it. The curse wasn't the oil. The curse was the arrogance that made them think the oil made them invincible. Oil prices crash. The ATM runs dry. Maduro faces a simple choice: cut spending or print money. Guess which one he picked? Oh, my sweet summer child. He chose the printing press. And he didn't just tap it gently. He broke the damn thing from overuse. Let's talk numbers, because they are genuinely hard to comprehend. 2013, inflation hits 40.6%, worrying but manageable. 2014, 62.2%. Okay, this is bad. 2015, 121.7%. This is really bad. 2016, 254%. Houston, we have a problem. 2018, 130,060%. Yes, you read that correctly. 130,000%. Let me translate that into real life. You go to sleep on Monday, a cup of coffee costs 450 bolivars. You wake up on Friday, that same cup of coffee costs 1 million bolivars. Prices weren't changing by the year. They weren't changing by the month, they were changing by the hour. Waiters stopped printing menus with prices because by the time you finished your appetizer, the steak had doubled in price. You ordered based on vibes and prayers. The believer became so worthless that people started weighing cash instead of counting it. Street vendors used scales. You paid for groceries by the kilogram of money. Craftspeople started weaving handbags out of Bolivar notes because the craft value was higher than the face value. Think about that. The currency was worth more as raw material than as money. In August 2018, Maduro raised minimum wage by 3,500%, from 5 million bolivars to 180 million bolivars per month. It sounded dramatic, revolutionary even. By November, those 180 million bolivars bought $6 at black market rates. $6. Imagine you're a teacher, a doctor, a cardiologist. You studied for years, you work 60-hour weeks, and your monthly salary buys you one Chipotle burrito. That's not an economy. That's a hostage situation. Maduro tried a monetary reform in August 2018. He removed 5 zeros from the currency. One new bolivar equals 100,000 old bolivars. This was supposed to restore confidence. It was like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic while the ocean poured through the hull. Inflation in 2019? 9,585%. The reform did nothing. And here's the brutal truth nobody talks about. Maduro knew this would happen. He understood basic economics. But he kept printing anyway. Why? Because the moment he stopped, he couldn't pay the soldiers, he couldn't pay the police, he couldn't pay the bureaucrats who kept him in power. The printing press wasn't an economic policy. It was a life support machine for the regime. Every bolivar printed put Maduro one more day in the palace. The fact that it destroyed the life savings of 28 million people, that it turned grandmothers into beggars, that was just the price of staying in power. The math doesn't lie. And the math said, you're done. Quick pause. If you're watching this and thinking, how did an entire country let this happen? Stay with me. because it gets so much darker. And if you're finding value in this forensic breakdown, do me a favor. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the bell, because I'm dissecting the biggest economic catastrophes in modern history. And Venezuela? Venezuela isn't even the final boss. Drop a comment. Would you rather live through hyperinflation or total economic collapse? Let me know. I read every single one. Now let's talk about what happens when money dies and hunger begins. A dark joke starts circulating on the streets of Caracas. It's called Why Quote 3. The punchline? You get skinny, but you don't get fit. It wasn't funny, but when you're starving, humor is the only nutrient left. According to a 2017 survey by Venezuelan universities, between 2014 and 2017, Venezuelans lost an average of 24 pounds per person. Not because they were hitting the gym, because they were skipping meals. By 2016, 90% of Venezuelans lived in poverty. Food consumption fell 40% between 2013 and 2017. In hospitals, babies died of malnutrition at rates not seen in decades. Infant mortality increased 30% in 1 year, from 2015 to 2016. The government quickly suppressed that data. Now here's where it gets truly sinister. The government saw this coming, and instead of fixing it, they weaponized it. Enter the CLAP program. Local Committees for Supply and Production. Sounds benign, right? Like a community food bank? Wrong. Here's what it actually was: a loyalty bribe system disguised as humanitarian aid. Once a month, maybe the government delivered boxes of subsidized food directly to households. Each box contained rice, flour, pasta, cooking oil, maybe some canned goods. Total value at subsidized prices, about $2 to $3. But here's the catch. You only got your box if you demonstrated political loyalty, attended a pro-government rally, your neighborhood gets boxes, signed a petition against the opposition, you get preference. Work for the government or belong to the Socialist Party, your box arrives like clockwork. Protested, criticized the regime, voted opposition. No box for you. Let me paint you a picture. You're Maria. You're 45. You're a teacher in Maracaibo. Your salary is 180 million bolivars per month. That's $6 USD. A kilogram of chicken costs 8 million bolivars. Rice costs 3 million per kilo. Cooking oil, if you can even find it, runs 5 million. To feed your family for 1 month, you need roughly 450 million bolivars. You earn 180 million. The clap box becomes the difference between your children eating or not eating. Now the government owns you. You can't protest, you can't speak out, you can't vote against them. Because if you do, your children starve. This isn't economics anymore. This is feudalism. This is creating a society where food access depends entirely on political submission. Supermarket shelves sat empty, not just because of shortages, but because the government imposed price controls that made it unprofitable for stores to stock goods. By 2017, stores operated at 25% capacity. And here's the forensic detail that should make your blood boil. Remember Alex Saab? Maduro's financial fixer, the guy swapped in a prisoner exchange with the US in 2023? Investigations revealed the government was importing low-quality food, often unfit for human consumption, at massive markups. They bought powdered milk from Mexico with virtually no nutritional value, billed the Venezuelan state millions, and pocketed the difference. While Venezuelan children fainted in schools from malnutrition, the regime's inner circle got rich off the very hunger they created. They turned starvation into a business model. Think about the level of cynicism required for that. You destroy the farms so people can't grow food. You destroy the currency so they can't buy food. And then you say, "Don't worry, I'll feed you. Just kneel." This economic crime did something the opposition never could. It broke the spirit of the working class. Because here's the truth. You can't fight a revolution on an empty stomach. When a house is on fire, you don't debate the architectural merits. You jump out the window. By 2018, Venezuela wasn't just on fire. It was an inferno. And the people made a choice. If they couldn't vote Maduro out with a ballot, they'd vote with their feet. Between 2014 and 2024, Approximately 7.7 million Venezuelans fled the country. That's more than 25% of the entire population. Let me contextualize that for you. Imagine if everyone in Texas just left, or if the entire country of Switzerland packed up and moved. This is the largest displacement crisis in Western Hemisphere history, bigger than Syria at points. And unlike Syria, there was no foreign invasion. There were no bombs falling from the sky. The bomb was the economic policy, and who left? Everyone, but specifically the people you need to run a country. Doctors, engineers, teachers, oil technicians, the skilled labor that makes civilization possible. By 2019, Venezuela lost 40% of its medical professionals. Picture this. You're in a hospital in Caracas in 2019. The power goes out because the electrical grid failed. We'll get to that. The backup generator doesn't work because the parts were stolen. And the surgeon? He's not there. He's in Miami washing dishes because his surgeon's salary in Venezuela dropped to $6 per month. Let me introduce you to Dr. Alejandro, cardiologist, Valencia, 2018, earned 180 million bolivars per month. That's $6 USD. His rent was 120 million. Bus fare to the hospital cost 500,000 bolivars each way. After transportation and rent, he had maybe 20 million bolivars left for food, medicine, and supporting 2 children. In July 2018, he walked across the border to Colombia with his family. 2 suitcases. That's it. He now drives Uber in Bogota and makes 10 times what he earned as a cardiologist in Venezuela. Multiply that story by 7.7 million people. Venezuela lost its human capital, the essential ingredient for any recovery. You can rebuild infrastructure, you can reform currency, you can attract investment, but if your doctors are driving taxis in Colombia, your engineers are washing dishes in Chile, and your teachers are cleaning houses in Peru, what exactly are you rebuilding with? The psychological cost compounds the economic costs. Grandparents left alone because their children fled. Families split across 3 countries, connected only by WhatsApp calls when the internet works. Property values in middle-class neighborhoods collapsed by 90% because everyone was selling to finance escape. And here's where the trap becomes permanent. The diaspora isn't coming back. Even if Venezuela's economy stabilized tomorrow, those 7.7 million people have built new lives. Their children speak Portuguese in São Paulo, Spanish with Chilean accents in Santiago, English in Miami. They've integrated, they've moved on. Venezuela didn't just lose its present, it lost its future. The exodus became self-reinforcing. Every person who left made the country slightly worse for those who remained. Fewer consumers, fewer taxpayers, fewer skilled workers, a death spiral of departures. And the desperation reached biblical proportions. Hundreds of thousands walked through the Darien Gap, one of the most dangerous jungles on earth, controlled by cartels, filled with snakes, disease, and death, just for a chance to reach the U.S. border. This mass exodus did 2 things. 1, initially it relieved pressure, fewer mouths to feed. 2, eventually it humiliated the regime on the global stage. You can scream socialist paradise all you want, but when a quarter of your population would rather risk death in a jungle than stay in your paradise, the verdict is already in. Imagine this. You're in an elevator on the 20th floor, or on a subway train deep underground. Or you're a surgeon, scalpel in hand, about to make an incision, and then, click. March 2019. Venezuela went dark. Not for an hour, not for a day, for nearly a week. This was the Great Blackout. The Guri Dam, one of the largest hydroelectric plants in the world, supplying 80% of the country's power, failed. What happened? According to Maduro, it was a quote 6. He literally claimed they hacked the dam from a laptop in Washington. The engineers who were left knew the truth. Negligence. Remember those 18,000 fired oil workers? The same thing happened to the electrical grid. They stopped cutting grass around substations, leading to fires. They stopped replacing turbines. They stopped maintaining transformers. They let the system rot until it simply gave up. When the power died, the water pump stopped. You're in a tropical country, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, no air conditioning, no fans, and now, no water coming out of the tap. People were scooping water from the Guare River, a river so polluted it's basically liquid sewage, just to flush toilets or wash clothes. But the true horror was in the hospitals. Neonatal incubators turned off. Dialysis machines stopped. Life support systems went silent. We'll never know the exact death toll of those 5 days, but doctors reported patients dying simply because the machines keeping them alive had no power. This was the moment the economy stopped being about numbers and became a physical threat to life. The state had failed to provide the two most basic things a civilization needs: light and water. And yet, in a twist of irony that would make a Hollywood writer blush, the regime found a way to survive. They realized that Bolivar was dead, so to stay in power, they had to embrace the one thing they hated most. By 2020, Venezuela entered the twilight zone. Walk down one street, people digging through trash bags for food. Walk down the next street, a shiny new store called a bodegon selling Nutella, Kirkland signature vitamins, PlayStation 5s, and imported champagne. After years of screaming, "Yankee, go home," Maduro did the unthinkable. He quietly legalized the US dollar. He stopped trying to control the exchange rate because he literally couldn't anymore. He let the dollar flow. Suddenly, Venezuela became a two-tier society. Tier 1, the 95% of people earning bolivars worth nothing. Tier 2, the 5%, government cronies, military generals, people with family abroad who had dollars. This created a bubble of luxury in Caracas. New restaurants opened with $100 steaks. Casinos reopened. Instagram influencers posted, quote, 9, but it was a mirage. The economy wasn't producing anything. It was an economy built on money laundering and remittances. Those dollars weren't coming from Venezuelan productivity. They were coming from 1, drug money being washed through luxury imports, 2, remittances from the 7.7 million people who fled, 3, corrupt officials siphoning off what remained of oil revenue. The government wasn't running a country. They were running a criminal enterprise disguised as a state. When the oil dried up, Maduro looked at a map of the Venezuelan Amazon, one of the most biodiverse places on the planet, and said, "Dig it up." He created the Arco Minero del Orinoco, a mining zone bigger than Portugal, open for gold extraction. But this wasn't industrial mining with safety standards and environmental protections. This was the Wild West. The regime handed control of these mines to a mix of military officers and actual criminal syndicates, including Colombian guerrillas like the ELN. They use mercury, poisonous, toxic mercury, to separate gold from dirt. That mercury flows into rivers, poisoning water for indigenous tribes and killing fish. The gold is flown out on private planes to Turkey, the UAE, Iran. It's sold for cash, off the books, no receipts, no taxes. Just bags of cash delivered to the presidential palace to keep the inner circle happy. By 2024 to 2025, Venezuela wasn't a state anymore. It was a criminal enterprise pretending to be a country. The economy wasn't based on GDP. It was based on extraction. Extract the oil. What's left? Extract the gold. Extract money from migrants. Extract the hope. But even crime only pays the bills for so long, because eventually you run out of things to steal, and you run out of friends to protect you. If you were following the news in 2023 to 2024, you might have heard whispers, "Venezuela is fixing itself." Inflation slowed slightly. Oil was flowing a bit more because the US eased some sanctions, the Chevron license. There was a deal on the table, the Barbados Agreement. The deal was simple. Hold a free election in July 2024, and the world will let you sell oil again. The economy could finally breathe. July 28, 2024. Election Day. The opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, didn't just win. He crushed it. We're talking a 70-30 split in many estimates. Exit polls screamed change. Maduro had a choice. Option A, accept defeat, negotiate an amnesty deal, retire to a beach in Turkey with your millions, let the country recover. Option B, steal the vote, flip the table, doom the economy to eternal isolation. He chose option B. He announced he won, refused to show voting tallies, arrested protesters, And just like that, the economic lifeline was cut. The U.S. said, deals off. Sanctions snapped back. Foreign investors packed their bags. This is the moment the verdict was truly signed. Because up until 2024, Maduro could blame imperialism. He could blame sanctions. But in 2024, he was given a golden key to unlock the sanctions, and he threw it in the river. He proved to the world, and more importantly to his own military, that as long as he was in charge, Venezuela would never make money again. He was the blockage in the pipe. And when a general can't pay his troops because the president is radioactive, that's when loyalty starts to rust. Now we arrive at the darkest part of the audit. When the oil economy died and the gold economy wasn't enough, the state turned to the most profitable commodity in South America, cocaine. For years, U.S. investigators tracked, quote, 14, the cartel of the suns. Why quote 15? Because Venezuelan generals wear sun insignias on their epaulets. The allegation, now the charge, is that the Venezuelan government essentially became the logistics department for drug trafficking. Imagine you're a drug lord. Usually you have to hide from the police. Now imagine you are the police. You control the radar. You control the ports. You control the airspace. It's the perfect business. But here's the economic catch. A narco state is unstable by nature. It invites heat. The U.S. Department of Justice wasn't looking at Maduro as a politician anymore. They were looking at him like El Chapo. The $15 million bounty on his head turned him into a walking lottery ticket. Think about the psychology of that. Every time Maduro walked into a room with his bodyguards, he had to wonder, quote 16, when the economy is bankrupt, loyalty has a price tag, and $15 million is a price tag a lot of hungry soldiers might find very attractive. This criminal economy isolated him completely. Even his allies, China, Russia, leftist governments in the region, started distancing themselves. Nobody wants to bank with a guy who has a DOJ indictment hanging over his neck. It's bad for business. So as we entered late 2025, Maduro was alone. The oil money, gone. The people gone or starving. The infrastructure, dead. The military, unpaid and tempted by the bounty. The walls were closing in. The economic reality had finally cornered the political fantasy. History teaches us one undeniable lesson about dictatorships. You can survive being hated. You can survive being sanctioned. You can even survive a coup or two. But you cannot survive when your own bodyguards realize they have a better future without you. Why did it happen now? Why January 2025? Because the economic math finally hit zero. Reports suggest that in the last months of 2025, cash payments to top military brass started arriving late, or they were lighter than usual. The gold mines were being squeezed. Drug routes were being intercepted by aggressive U.S. Colombian patrols. The loot was running out. And that brings us to the ultimate economic concept, incentive structures. For 10 years, the incentive for the military was protect Maduro, get paid, stay safe. January 2025, the incentive flipped. Protect Maduro, go down with the ship, hand him over. Maybe get a plea deal. Maybe keep some of the money. When the operation went down, there was no fanatical fight-to-the-death defense from thousands of troops. The regime had already hollowed itself out. The structure was rotten. One kick, and it all came down. The economy didn't just weaken him. It stripped him of his shield. It turned him from a leader into a liability. So here we are. Nicolas Maduro is in a cell in Brooklyn. But let's be clear about what actually defeated him. It wasn't just political ideology. It wasn't just international pressure. It was a refusal to accept the laws of reality. He thought he could print wealth. He couldn't. He thought he could eat oil. He couldn't. He thought he could rule over ruins forever. He couldn't. Here's the final bill of the Maduro era. 1. GDP, contracted by nearly 80%, one of the worst economic collapses in peacetime history. 2. Poverty. At its peak, over 90% of the population lived in poverty. 3. Migration. Nearly 8 million people, 25% of the country, forced into exile. 4. Currency, deleted. A currency so worthless it ceased to exist. There will be trials, there will be lawyers, there will be headlines about justice, But there is no courtroom big enough to hold the true scale of what Venezuelans endured. You cannot sue for a lost decade. You cannot refund a stolen childhood. You cannot put a price on the empty chairs at dinner tables where 8 million people used to sit. The economy that nailed Maduro also nailed the Venezuelan people to a cross of suffering. He may be gone. The nightmare may be over, but the waking up, the rebuilding, that's going to be the hardest work of all. If you found this forensic deep dive valuable, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It pushes this video past the algorithm and gets it to people who need to understand the truth. Hit subscribe if you want to be here for the next chapter. Because trust me, the story of how Venezuela rebuilds, how they turn the lights back on, is going to be just as wild as the story of how they went out. Drop a comment. What do you think happens next for Venezuela? Rebuild or collapse? I'll see you in the comments. And remember, economics isn't just about money. It's about life.